Sloane Whitfield was sitting at my kitchen table in a borrowed flannel shirt, with her still damp the rain, hair splant from the rain, and I was pretending very hard to in the pasta I was supposed to be watching. The shirt was mine. She had shown up at my door 40 minutes ago, with wet shoulders, and a takeout bag. From the Thai place on Granville that she knew I liked. And, when I pointed out that she was soaked through her jacket, she had already disappeared into my hallway to find something dry. She came back in my old UBC flannel, the faded blue one I had been looking for since October. And sit down like that was a completely ordinary thing to do. She was reading something on her phone, with one knee pulled up to her chest. The takeout containers opened between us, and I was burning the garlic I had been cooking for no reason, because I had completely forgotten why I started. "Sloane," I said. "Yeah, the water's boiling over." She did not look up. "You're the one standing next to it." I turned back to the stove. Right. That was how things worked with us. She was very calm about my disasters, and I was very calm about hers, and neither of us talked about why that arrangement had lasted almost 5 years, without either of us walking away from it. We met in the second year of my engineering program at UBC. At a study session, I only attended because my roommate told me there would be pizza. There was no pizza. There was Sloane at the end of a long table, pointing at a whiteboard and explaining thermodynamics to 4 people who looked personally offended by the information. I sat down, mostly because she was funny about it. She had a way of explaining complicated things that made you feel like the confusions was the interesting part. Like, you were not behind, you were just standing at the edge of something that required a better angle. After that, the study sessions became a regular thing. Then coffee became a regular thing. Then eventually, we were the people who texted each other when something small went wrong. And it felt too stupid to call it a real problem. By the time we graduated, we were each other's first call for anything that mattered, and most things that did not. She flew in from Toronto when my grandmother died. I drove to Victoria in a February snowstorm, when her lease fell through, and she had nowhere to go for a week. She kept a spare key to my apartment. I knew her coffee order well enough that I sometimes stopped on the way over, without being asked. We called it friendship, because that was the word that covered everything without asking too much. We did not call it anything else, even when we probably should have. She had been with Kevin for 2 years. Kevin worked in finance in Calgary, flew into Vancouver on weekends when he felt like it, and had the specific brand of confidence that came from never once being told his instincts were wrong. He was not terrible, he was just very certain about everything, in a way that left no room for Sloane to be uncertain, which she was, sometimes, in small ways, which was one of the things I liked most about her. She thought out loud, she changed her mind, she admitted when she was not sure. Kevin found this inefficient. 3 weeks ago, Sloane had called me on a Tuesday night and said, simply, I ended it. Not I'm thinking about ending it. Not we had a fight. Just that. Past tense. Done. I said, okay. Do you want to come over? She said, I already ordered your Thai place. I said, I'll start the pasta. She said, you don't need pasta if there's Thai food. I said, I know. She came anyway. She sat on my couch in a UBC sweatshirt and said, I was the only one holding us together and I got tired. That was it. No crying, no falling apart, no dramatic recap of the final conversation. Just Sloane looking at the middle distance with her feet tucked under her, and her takeout container balanced on her knee, being very honest about what had cost her something. So tonight was not unusual. She came over when things were hard. I fed her. She stole my flannel. This was the arrangement. Except tonight she was staying for the Open Studios event at the gallery. Her friend managed downtown, and I was going with her, because her original plan had been to go with Kevin, and now there was a +1 slot that she had, without apparent overthinking, offered to me. I turned the burner down, pushed the garlic around the pan, and tried to remember how to behave like a normal person in a borrowed flannel situation. She looked up from her phone. "Do you own a jacket that doesn't look like it's been camping?" "My jacket is fine." "Your jacket has a rip on the left pocket. The pocket still works." Sloane set her phone down. "Jon. My name, one syllable." The way she said it when she was not going to argue, but was also not going to agree. "It's art gallery event," she said. "It matters. The rip is on the inside of the pocket. Nobody will see it. I will see it." "Then look at the art." She looked at me for a second, and then she smiled. Not the polished one she used for professional situations, just the real one. The small one that showed up when I said something she thought was actually funny. It lasted about 3 seconds. Then she looked back at her phone. I went to find a different jacket. The gallery was called Threshold, which suited it. It sat on the edge of Gastown, one of those buildings that looked modest from the street, and opened into something larger than you expected inside. Sloane's friend Priya managed the event's programming, which meant the evening was organized with the specific controlled chaos of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and was also one misaligned spotlight away from losing her mind. When we walked in, the main floor was already filling up. Local artists had set up in different sections, work ranging from large installations that took up an entire corner to smaller pieces that required you to lean in close. String lights were strung across the ceiling beams. The bar along the far wall was doing well. The whole place had that particular hum of a well-run event that looked effortless, because of how much effort was invisible underneath it. Sloane stopped inside the entrance, took one breath, and became sharper. Her shoulders settled differently. Her eyes moved through the room in that specific way she had when she was mapping a space, identifying where things were, what needed attention, who she needed to say hello to, and in what order. She had done her thesis on structural acoustics in public spaces. She now worked for an engineering consultancy in Vancouver that did a lot of work on cultural buildings, galleries, performance venues, civic spaces. She had strong opinions about sightlines and sound diffusion that most people found excessive. I found them interesting, which she had pointed out exactly once and then never mentioned again. Priya appeared from somewhere near the east corridor, tablet in one hand, earpiece in the other, wearing an expression that was 3 separate crises doing their best impression of calm. "Sloane, you came." Priya hugged her fast, then looked at me. "Jon, you look nice." "Thanks. Your jacket has a rip. The pocket still works." Priya stared. Sloane started to something. Priya turned back to Sloane already. "The situation," Priya said. Sloane said, "Worst one first." Priya pulled a breath. "One of the East Corner installations, the sound piece, it's drawing too much power. We've had to reroute, which means the speakers for the corner are on a different feed now, and there's a lag. The artist knows and she's not happy, but she's being professional, fixable." Second, one of our main sponsors, Hartfield Properties, their rep wants to speak at 8:30. I had him down for 8:15. He does not appear to know this. Sloane said, "Does the time actually matter?" Priya said, "It matters to him. His ego has its own calendar invite." Sloane said, "Put him at 8:20. It sounds like a compromise." Priya blinked. "That is smart." Priya made a note. Third thing, and this is the bad one. I looked between them. "The Nakamura piece." Sloane went still. "That's the feature installation." Priya said yes, the large one. Priya said yes, the piece that is supposed to be the centerpiece of the East Wing. Priya said, "The crate was delivered this afternoon. But the hydraulic mount we ordered for the display platform, it arrived damaged. The piece itself is fine, but we cannot install it the way we planned, and the backup plan requires 2 people with the right equipment clearance, and apparently only one of those people is here tonight." Sloane closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them with a calm that I recognized. It was the same calm she had on Tuesday nights when things were hard, organized, a little distant, like she had moved the feeling somewhere. She could deal with it later. She turned to me. Jon, this is where I am going to abandon you for a little while. I know. You came with me knowing something like this might happen. I also came for the free wine. She almost smiled. Then she turned back to Priya. Who's the equipment person that's here? Priya said. A tech named Darren. He says he can do the rigging if someone assists who knows what they're doing. I started to say something. Sloane looked at me. No. You're in a good jacket. I can help. You will not. Jon, I've seen the diagrams for that kind of mount. You sent me the article about it 2 months ago because you thought the load distribution problem was interesting. She stared. I thought it was interesting. She stared a little longer. Priya pointed between us with one finger. I need an answer in about 90 seconds, because the artist is standing by the bar, looking at her phone in a way that suggests she's writing a strongly worded email in her head. Sloane looked at me, something open and careful in her expression, and said, You actually read it. I said, I told you I would. She looked at me for a second longer than made sense for the situation, and then she said, Priya, point us at Darren. The Nakamura installation was called Latitude, and it weighed enough that I revised upward my estimate of how much the article I had read 2 months ago was going to help me. The piece itself was a large suspended structure, curved aluminum, and layered acrylic, meant to hang from the ceiling mount at a precise angle that would catch the gallery lighting and distribute it across the east wall in a pattern that changed as you moved through the space. The damaged hydraulic mount had been replaced with a manual rigging system that was technically workable but required careful calibration and 2 sets of hands that understood what they were doing. Darren was a compact guy in his 40s who looked at my jacket when I walked in and said, You event staff? I said, No. He said, You know load distribution? I said, Structural background engineering. He nodded, like that was acceptable, and handed me a cable guide. What followed was about 40 minutes of work I was not dressed for. We got the main structure positioned, calibrated the rigging tension in 3 stages, corrected twice when the angle read wrong, and finally got the piece hanging at the orientation Darren confirmed against the artist's specification sheet. My jacket came off somewhere in the 2nd stage. My sleeves were rolled up by the 3rd. The artist, whose name was Keiko, came in to check the installation when we were done. She walked a slow circle around the piece, watching the light move across the east wall, and said nothing for about 30 seconds. Then she said, The angle is correct, and walked back out. Darren said, I've worked with her for 6 years. That's 5 stars. I put my jacket back on, straightened my collar as best I could, and walked back into the main gallery. Sloane was near the east archway, mid-conversation with a man in a dark blazer holding a glass of wine. She saw the installation first, the light moving across the wall behind me. Then, she saw me. The conversation did not stop immediately, but her focus shifted in a way that was visible if you knew where to look. Her eyes moved from the light to my rolled sleeves to my face, and something in her expression changed quietly, like a window opening in a room that had been closed too long. She excused herself and came across the room toward me. You got it up. I lifted a cable guide I was still holding. You helped, she said. You read an article 2 months ago and then retained it. That's still mostly reading. Jon. The way she said my Sena stopped me. She reached out and straightened my collar, her fingers pausing there against the fabric, not fixed, just resting. You keep doing things, she said quietly, that make it very difficult to pretend I'm not paying attention. I said, that sounds like a mutual problem. Her breath shifted, not dramatically. Just a small adjustment, the kind you make when something catches you off guard. Then someone called her name from across the room, and she stepped back, her hand dropping. Don't go far, she said. I'm not hard to find. I'll be the one near the wine I haven't touched yet. Go touch it, she said. You've earned it. Then she was gone, back into the room, back into the event. Priya appeared at my shoulder, 30 seconds later, with 2 glasses of red wine. She handed me one and looked at Sloane, moving through the crowd. She doesn't let many people help her, I said. I'm not sure I helped. Priya said, you carried cables in a good jacket, and she watched you do it with the exact expression, she thinks nobody notices. I think she just needed the collar adjusted. Priya gave me a look. Sure, she said. That's what that was. Before I could answer, someone behind her dropped a program binder, with a sound that made 3 people nearby turn, and Priya was gone. I turned toward the bar, and found Kevin standing about 3 feet to my left. He looked the same. Sharp clothes, easy posture, that particular expression of someone who had decided he already knew what was worth his attention. His firm had bought a table for the event, apparently. I had not known. Sloane had not known either, or if she had not mentioned it, which meant she hadn't. Kevin, I said. He turned, looked at me, then passed me toward where Sloane was, then back. Jon. Right. He offered his hand the way someone does when they want to establish something by doing it first. Good to see you. You've been the fallback option before, right? The reliable friend slot. I kept my face even. Something like that. He looked towards Sloane. She moved fast, I said. She organized an event. That's her job, he said. That's what I mean about her. She's always working. Even when she's not. You start to feel like everything comes second to whatever project she's decided matters most. He smiled. Like this was something he was sharing, rather than something he was pressing. I just think someone should tell her that. Someone who cares about her long term. There was a version of me that would have nodded and said something careful. I don't know which version showed up, but it wasn't that one. I said, with respect, you don't have the context to explain her to me. His jaw moved a little. I've known her 5 years, I said. She doesn't work instead of caring about people. She works because she cares. Those are not the same thing, and the difference matters. Kevin said nothing for a moment. I've known her 3 years. I looked at him. I know. Then I walked away. I found Sloane in the smaller side gallery, standing in front of a photograph that took up almost an entire wall. A winter shoreline, somewhere on the BC coast. The kind of image that looked quiet until you noticed how much was moving in it. She had one hand on the back of a bench, her weight shifted slightly, and she was just looking. I came up beside her. Bad moment? She said. Kevin's here. I said I know. I ran into him. She turned to look at me. He said something, didn't he? He said some things that had some truth in them, and some things that didn't. Her expression closed for a second. I stepped a little closer. I told her because I didn't want it sitting between us like something Kevin got to own. She said, what did he get right? I said, that you work hard, and that people who don't understand it can feel like they come second. She was quiet. I said, what he got wrong was thinking that was a flaw. Sloane looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she said quietly, you are very unfair sometimes. I said, how? She said, because you make it very easy to forget that I'm supposed to keep a certain amount of distance here. I said, I'm not trying to make you forget anything. She said, I know. That's the part that's unfair. Priya appeared in the doorway, stopped, and looked between us, with the expression of someone who had walked into a room mid-sentence. I am so sorry, she said, and genuinely meant it, but the Hartfield rep wants the donor photo with Sloane and her guest. Sloane did not look away from me. Tell him yes. Priya said yes. Sloane turned. Yes, Jon, is that okay? I said it was fine. She reached for my hand. Not subtle, not casual, not accidentally. Just reached for it. In a side gallery in a Gastown Arts building, with Priya watching and the Hartfield rep waiting. And the whole evening still technically happening around us. I'm tired, she said, of acting like you're just convenient. Priya made a sound that was not quite a word. Wonderful, she said. Terrifying, but wonderful. Let's go do the photo. The photo was taken near the Nakamura piece, which Priya informed us was already being mentioned in the event's Instagram story as a dramatic unveiling. Because rich people and arts patrons enjoyed reframing crisis as curation. The photographer arranged us near two board members and told everyone to shift closer. Sloane moved first. Her hands found my arm. I stood beside her and did not pretend to be casual about it. Across the room, I saw Kevin check his phone, finish his drink, and leave before the acknowledgement remarks started. I did not watch him go for long. The rest of the evening moved differently after that. Not slower, just clearer. I kept close without becoming another thing she had to manage. I held a door. I intercepted a board member who wanted 15 minutes of her time, and diplomatically suggested he email her office Monday morning. I stood beside her during the sponsor remarks and handed her the sparkling water. She had been meaning to pick up for an hour. After the final guests filtered out, the gallery went quiet in that specific way buildings do when the event is over, but the cleanup hasn't started. The string lights were still on. The door was closed. A few staff moved through the space with quiet efficiency. Sloane stood near the east wall, her shoes off, her clipboard tucked under one arm, watching Priya say goodnight to the last caterer. She looked the way she always looked when something hard was finished and she hadn't let herself rest yet. Held together out of habit. Priya came over. Final count is good. Keiko loved the installation, and she explicitly used the word loved, which Darren says is unprecedented. The Hartfield rep left happy. The sound issue in the east corner was barely noticeable. She looked at me. You are both useful and extremely inconvenient for my professional composure. Priya. She held up one hand. I am going home. She pointed between us with one finger. Whatever this is, it's been this for longer than either of you has admitted out loud. And I say that with full affection and absolutely no patience left tonight. Good night. She was gone before either of us could answer. The gallery was ours for a few minutes. The hum of the ventilation. The distant sound of someone locking up in the back corridor. The Nakamura piece still catching the ambient light. The pattern moving slowly across the east wall like it had always been there. Sloane finally set her shoes down and let herself exhale. There she is, I said. She said, don't start. You ran an art opening with a damaged mount and a sponsor, with a feelings-based scheduling system. And a rigging problem. And Kevin. That's more manageable than an ex who shows up knowing which wine you actually drink, instead of which one you order to be polite. She looked at me for a moment. How do you know that? Because I've watched you hold a glass of Pinot Gris for an hour at 3 different events, and never actually drink it. The Riesling, you finish. She went quiet. Then she said, that's an embarrassing amount of attention. I said, I know. She said, you've always been like this. I said, yes, she said. And I've been pretending not to notice. I said, I know that too. She sat down on the bench near the side gallery and looked up at me. The gallery lights low, the installation doing its slow, quiet work on the wall behind me. She looked tired in the way that was honest. Not defeated. Just done performing. So, I said, and sat beside her. She looked at the middle distance. I have been, she said carefully, very deliberate, about keeping a certain shape to this, to us. Because I didn't want to be wrong about it and lose the one thing that has never actually let me down. I said, you weren't wrong about it. She said, I know that now. I said, Sloane. She looked at me. You have been the thing in my life that stayed, I said. Every time something else shifted, you were still there. I'm not interested in a different version of this. I like this version. I just want to stop pretending we don't know what it is. She looked at me for a long moment. You know what the worst part is? I said, what? She said, I've known for at least 2 years. I said, so have I. She let out a breath that sounded like something releasing. You could have said something. I said, so could you? She said, I didn't want to be the one who made it complicated. I said, it was already complicated. We were just calling it something else. She looked at the installation on the wall, the light moving, slow and patient. Then she looked at me. Okay, she said, just that? Okay. I kissed her in an empty gallery in Gastown, on a Friday night in November, with the string lights still on, and the Nakamura piece doing something beautiful to the wall that neither of us looked at. She kissed me back with 5 years of pretending. Finally out of the way, her hand found the front of my jacket, not pulling, just holding. Mine went to her shoulder, steady. When we pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead near mine, her eyes still closed for another second. Celia's going to be unbearable about this, she said. I said Priya. She said, right. Yes, Priya is going to be absolutely unbearable. I said, she's already started. Sloane said, I heard. I drove her home through the city. Wet November streets reflecting the streetlights back up at us. The kind of night Vancouver does best when it's not trying to. She had her feet tucked up on the seat, my jacket over her legs, her hand resting on the console between us. She did not reach for my hand. Then she did. Then she held it. At her building in Kitsilano, I walked her up the stairs I had walked up 100 times. The same hallway, the same flickering third light. Nobody had fixed since August. The same neighbor's bike, locked to the railing outside their door. Everything the same. She unlocked her apartment and turned around in the doorway. She said, "Do you want to come in?" I said yes. She said, "I should tell you that I'm going to be very normal about this." I said, "You are not going to be normal about this at all." She said, "No, I'm not." She stepped aside to let me in. Inside she dropped her bag on the entry table and turned to face me. The apartment quiet around us. The November rain starting against the windows. She looked at me the way she had been not looking at me for 5 years, direct and unguarded, and said, for the record, "I've been keeping your flannel on purpose," I said. "I know. I bought a second one." She stared. "You bought a second one so I could keep stealing the first one." I said, "The pocket on the first one is fine." She said, "I hate you." I said, "I know." She said, "I really don't. I know that too." She laughed. A real one. The small surprised kind she made when something caught her off guard. And she stepped forward and kissed me again. This time in her own apartment with the rain on the windows. And nobody needing anything from either of us. 2 months later, Priya told the flannel story at a dinner party before either of us got the chance to stop her. Sloane told her she was replaceable. Priya said the event calendar disagreed, and also that she had known since the collar thing in October. And everyone at the table had a different opinion on what exactly the collar thing meant, which is the kind of conversation that happens when you wait too long to say a simple thing. She still stole my flannel. I still knew her coffee order. We still argued about the best route across the Burrard Bridge, and whether a building's acoustics were a reasonable topic for a Saturday morning. We still got takeout from the Thai place on Granville, and she still ate most of the spring rolls before I noticed. Nothing changed that should have. Everything changed that should have. We just finally stopped calling it something smaller than what it was.